Howdy again everyone, and a warm welcome to my review of Samyang's latest full-frame camera lens designed for Sony's E-mount mirrorless cameras, the AF 18mm f2.8 FE. I've been having fun with this one. I'd like to thank Samyang for sending me an early production copy of this lens for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. Right away, the charm of such a lens is obvious, not to mention its market potential. A small-sized, lightweight, inexpensive, ultra-wide-angle lens could easily find its way into the camera bags of holidaymakers and landscape photographers alike, perhaps complementing a standard zoom lens. And that 18mm focal length on a full-frame camera is really nice, an ultra-wide angle, but by no means extremely wide. Your surroundings dramatically crowd in around you when you're shooting at 18mm, again bringing you expansive landscape pictures, but also great for shooting indoors. But it's not such a wide angle that your subject is totally pushed away, and neither is it such a wide angle that it takes frustrating precision to get your backgrounds composed nicely. Also, this lens's maximum aperture of f2.8 is just about bright enough to capture the sky at night at a pinch. Throw in autofocus and a reasonable price of £350 in the UK or $400 and it could be a recipe for serious success, so let's take a closer look. The lens itself is as small as it is cosmetically uninspiring. I was hoping it might be even smaller than this, but then again, ultra-wide-angle lenses need more complex optics inside them in order to perform well. At only 145 grams, it's impressively lightweight for a full-frame lens. It's based on a metal lens mount with a body that feels metallic, but there's no weather sealing gasket at the rear. The only control point on the lens is a plastic focus ring which turns smoothly. It works with the focus motor nice and responsively if you're shooting in manual focus mode. The lens doesn't have image stabilization, but it does have camera controlled aperture and autofocus. The autofocus motor is quick and reasonably confident when shooting in stills mode, as you can see here. It also works nice and accurately. It's an impressively quiet autofocus system too, although when shooting video, if you turn your recording levels way up, then you'll catch just the faintest of clicking sounds. A nice little bonus is that the lens has a 58mm filter thread, and I successfully used a Marumi Fit and Slim polarizing filter on it with no vignetting problems. Having a filter thread on an ultra-wide-angle lens is not something to be taken for granted these days, especially one with such a small diameter. The lens also comes shipped with a dinky little hood that will offer, well, at least a few degrees of protection from flaring. Overall, the lens's build quality is all present and correct here, except for maybe a weather sealing gasket, but I reckon that's made up for by having that useful filter thread. Alright, image quality. I'll be testing this lens on my trusty Sony a7R II with its full-frame 42MP sensor, quite a daunting challenge for any camera lens. At f2.8, picture quality is lovely and sharp in the middle of the image, although contrast could carry just a tiny bit more weight. And the image corners? Actually, not bad at all. This early production copy of the lens has a touch of astigmatism to it, but really, it's fairly sharp. Stop down to f4 for a nice improvement in contrast and resolution, and contrast is perfect back in the middle of the image now. Stop down again to f5.6 and image quality is still great in the middle, and the corners look a bit sharper now too, and the image stays this sharp down to f11. The eagle-eyed among you may notice just a hint of chromatic aberration here, but it's nothing to worry about at all. In fact, considering its small size and low price, the lens is a surprisingly good performer, even on that 42MP full-frame sensor. Now, if you were to put this lens on one of Sony's APS-C cameras, then the crop factor leaves you with the full-frame equivalent of a 27mm lens, much less exciting in use, but nonetheless very useful. So let's see how it performs on my Sony a5100 with its 24MP APS-C sensor. At f2.8, sharpness in the middle of the image is just good. Contrast is slightly low again. The corner image quality is noticeably soft. However, you only need to stop down to f4 and everything comes up roses, looking nice and sharp across the whole image frame. Even if you stop down further though, there's no improvement from here. So the lens performs alright on APS-C, but it's a little happier on full frame. Okay, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting on a full frame camera. These images are without any in-camera corrections. The bad news is that some barrel distortion is noticeable here with a slight moustache pattern. The good news though is that it's only moderate, and in all my test pictures I never noticed any distortion problems. At f2.8, vignetting is very high. Well, that's no surprise for a small-sized ultra-wide lens. The corners get somewhat brighter at f4 and f5.6, but even down to f8, some vignetting remains. Let's see now about close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to 25 cm, just about good enough for smaller subjects. At f2.8, the close-up image quality is fairly sharp, although a little colour fringing is noticeable on contrasting edges. Stop down to f4 though, and that is gone, replaced with some lovely extra contrast. Now let's see how the lens works against bright light. Generally, resistance to flaring is okay, but at a very particular angle you see a little flash of light popping in. Only at a very particular angle though. And while we're working in the dark, let's have a look at chroma levels. f2.8 is just about bright enough for some casual astrophotography, and the ultra-wide angle helps too, of course. At f2.8, over in the corners, we see some slight chroma smearing, little wingtips on the edges of those bright stars. I have seen worse than this though, and stop down to f4 to make it go away. And finally, bokeh. This is obviously not a lens that's intended to bring you out of focus backgrounds, but if you do get close enough to your subject, then the resulting bokeh all around it will always look nice and soft, well, maybe with just the tiniest of edges to it. So overall then, as you might have guessed, I really quite liked this one. In terms of its optics, the lens's shining attribute is its impressive sharpness, and that's helped along by the fact there are no major slip-ups in any other optical area. It's lovely and small, perfect for holidays and landscape photography. That, combined with its reasonable price, incredible usefulness, and impressive image quality, can only mean one thing: that this little lens has to come highly recommended.